Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's great to get a chance to rise and talk about the report and some of the work that the good work that the Foreign Affairs Committee has been doing and that this minister has been doing. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, I think, has done an outstanding job on the world stage and representing Canada. And I just want to take a moment to also let you know, Speaker, I'll be sharing my time with the member from Prince Albert. We've been working on a number of things at committee, and I just want to sort of just maybe review some of the committee business and where we've been at. Obviously, this is a report that was done last year, and one that we think is important as we look at some of the multilateral organizations that we're involved with. The OAS is certainly important for the Southern Hemisphere, and I know that the organization has had some challenges over time. And we still believe that's important. And when we were down in Washington, meeting with various ambassadors and talking with people, they said, you know, it's still important to engage with the OAS. It's still important to work with them. And I know that we're involved with a number of multilateral organizations. Some of these organizations are not always perfect, but I believe that if we see what's happened with the OSCE, so the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, we see how important they have been right now in terms of election monitoring and what's going on with Ukraine, and the job that we as Canadians have done over there with the large delegations we've sent, and how important the role has been with Canada. What I want to do is just maybe read a bit from the report in terms of some of the conclusions and recommendations that we had, and just give you the framework just to remind people that may not have had a chance to read this report online. But I'm going to read from the conclusions and recommendations just to read into the record. It says, as the discussion above illustrates, the OAS is not a perfect organization. I think I just alluded to that. It is, however, an important one for Canada and for the hemisphere. The committee is of the opinion that Canada's long-standing commitment to the OAS as a premier multilateral organization in the Western Hemisphere should continue, focused around the OAS core competencies of democratic governance, human rights, security, and economic development. And I think one of the things that we heard when we were in Washington was that there's sort of been mission creep. The OAS has looked at maybe continue to expand its mandate, which multilateral organizations will do from time to time. And what we heard down there from various ambassadors and people that we talked to in the organization is that maybe the OAS should return to its core, return to some of the things that it does well. And that's why I say that if we look at some of the competencies that the OAS shares, such as democratic governance, human rights, security, and economic development, I think that we see that if they could get back to some of those core things, I think that would make the organization more effective. And so I'll continue on with the conclusion. It says that being said, there is a clear and urgent need for reforms that can put the financing of the organization on a stable and sustainable footing and return its emphasis to this core work. And I think that's one of the issues that were raised up there, is that once again, as usual, Canada is punching way above its weight in terms of financial contributions. Certainly organizations that belong to OAS that pay very little, if not much at all. I've got a list here that we include in the appendix. I just wanted to share some of those in a moment on that. So such reforms would enable the organization to implement its responsibilities in an effective manner and live up to its purposes as established in the organization's founding charter and the Inter-American Democratic Charter. Canada has and should continue to negotiate reforms in these areas. And one of the things that we saw when we were in Washington as we talked to people is that Canada has taken a leadership role in its organizations in terms of championing reforms. Canada is also very well respected by all the countries around the table. We're seen as an honest broker. We're seen as somebody that is there that can represent the needs of everybody, not someone that's always trying to implement their will and demand on everybody else, but someone that's willing to sit at the table and help negotiate and help lead and help move forward with real and practical solutions. I'll continue. It says the committee is under no illusions above the novelty of these observations or about the difficulty in realizing reforms. As I say, once again, we understand that the organization is far from perfect, but we also understand that this is one of the few ways that we can help engage in the Americas, and so why we still need to remain at the table. Canada is one of 34 member states who participates in an organization that works by consensus, and I think that's always a challenge when you're working by consensus, that you don't always get everything you want, and I think that that's always one of the challenges that they have as well. The basic problems facing the OAS are well known. Solutions have been proposed over the years from within and outside the organization, but decisions that inevitably involve trade-offs in financing or programming or both and are not easily to reach in any political forum, let alone one representing millions of people from diverse countries that stretch from the North to the South Poles. The context has also changed since Canada joined the OAS in 1990. The emergence of sub-regional blocs in the hemisphere and political divisions within the OAS are an added complication for the efforts to address the organization's long-standing challenges. And so once again, we're not naive to think that the organization does not have issues, but we still believe that it's an important one and we should still remain at the table to participate. However, the existence of the OAS since 1948, its body of concrete accomplishments and its ability to adapt its work to changes that have taken place in the hemisphere since its founding are testament to its value. They are also evidence that the OAS is capable of being dynamic. Moreover, as a multilateral forum, the OAS has and continues to provide space for dialogue and cooperation and the pooling of resources, expertise, and experiences, thus helping to establish conditions to which compromise and shared purpose are possible. So based on some of these conclusions, here are some of the recommendations that the committee put forward as a result of our report and the work that was done down there. The first recommendation was that the committee recommends that the Government of Canada continue to support the Organization of American States and the OAS as the premier multilateral organization in the Western Hemisphere. We believe that, as I said before, while the organization may not be perfect, we also believe that this is one of the few areas that we can engage with the Southern Hemisphere, and so that's why we believe we should still be at the table. The second recommendation that we had was that the committee recommends that the Government of Canada continue to push for reforms to strengthen the OAS with its like-minded partners through the OAS General Assembly and the Permanent Council. So once again, in talking with our ambassador and talking with our staff who are well respected down there, they realize, and our government realizes, that this organization needs to continue to look at reforms to strengthen it. We realize that there is more that can be done. We realize that in terms of some of the things that have been involved with over the years has continued to require more and more resources, and we think that, quite frankly, if they were to sharpen their focus on some of these things, that this would make them a more effective organization. So one of the second recommendation would be, as part of that, would be, as they continue to push reforms to strengthen the OAS and its like-minded partners through the OAS General Assembly and Permanent Council. So these possible reforms could include a return to the organization's focus to its core areas of work, namely democratic governance, human rights, security, and development. And so once again, I said, as I mentioned before, there's been a number of different areas that OAS is involved in. We believe if they would go back to their core, we think that would be more effective and certainly more focused and important. B was that the result in a substantial reduction in the number of existing OAS mandates. So once again, number of mission creep has happened here in terms of where they're at, and principally those that fall outside of the organization's core areas of work, as I've listed above. C was to lead to formula for increasing the member states' assessed quotas to the OAS regular fund to a degree that is at a minimum sufficient to cover annual inflationary and personal costs. So while we believe that we share a leadership role there, we also believe that other countries should do their fair share and probably more in terms of financial support. D, encourage consideration of the proposal to reduce the United States quota to 49% of the OAS regular fund, so long as doing so would not result in a reduction in the regular fund's total budget. E, institute a process whereby new mandates cannot be added to the OAS portfolio of work without funding sources being identified, accompanied by analysis of the rationale for the OAS action in the relevant areas. And F, ensure that all reasonable OAS activities related to the promotion and protection of democratic governance and human rights are fully, consistently, and predictably funded. So once again, as we look at some of the things that this organization is involved in, the recommendations of the committee were to go back to their core, to focus on what they do well, and to make sure that they continue to represent democracy in that area. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Question et commentaires. The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the comments, and I want to pick up on the member's last comments in regards to going back to those, the core. And this is something that we often need to look at as organizations develop. They will often look for additional things and responsibilities to take on. And I did think it was an important recommendation coming out of the committee. I, for one, dealing with issues of human rights, the whole idea of democracy and so forth. In Winnipeg later this year, we're going to actually be having the official opening of the Human Rights Museum, Mr. Speaker, in the heart of downtown Winnipeg. And, people are concerned about human rights and the issue of human rights. And I'm wondering if the member would just provide some further comment in regards to the important role that the organization plays in this hemisphere in regards to the whole issue of human rights.
Honourable member for Niagara West, Glanbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do want to thank my honourable colleague from Winnipeg North. He raises a great question. I think the challenge we have in this other hemisphere is there's a few states that still present a lot of problems, in the area. And if you look at Venezuela as an example, I remember meeting with colleagues from Colombia a short time ago who are concerned, quite frankly, with what's going on in that area. And as you have a number of states or actors, national actors that are probably are a challenge, I think that one of the things that an organization like this can do is bring about peer pressure in terms of if you've got a number of organizations that are encouraging bad actors to step up their game, if you will. I think that's why it's important to have them at the table. And I know that Venezuela over recent times has done a number of different things that quite frankly are undemocratic in terms of the way they've operated over the years. And I think that's probably an understatement in terms of what they've done. And I think that what is helpful is that when you have a collection of countries that can, especially from the area, can look at what they're doing and encourage these members to behave better.
Questions and comments? Question et commentaires. L'honorable député de Abitibi-Baie-James de Neuville. AU.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et je remercie l'honorable collègue pour son discours et le féliciter aussi de présider le comité des affaires étrangères avec un contrôle et une mainmise assez totale, Monsieur le Président. J'aimerais qu'il m'explique un peu dans la réponse du gouvernement à la recommandation 2F, que le gouvernement appuie en principe la recommandation. J'aimerais qu'il élabore sur le deuxième paragraphe de la réponse du gouvernement où le gouvernement dit « Conformément à l'importance générale qu'il accorde à la rigueur budgétaire et à de bonnes pratiques de gestion, le Canada a également préconisé l'adoption d'une planification axée sur les résultats de façon à assurer l'utilisation la plus optimale des ressources rares. » J'aimerais qu'il élabore un peu sur la signification de ce paragraphe, Monsieur le Président.
Honourable member for Niagara West, Glanbrook, you have about a minute.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague across the way who sits on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I know that as a committee, we work very well together in terms of some of the issues that we're looking at. As I mentioned before, we've been looking at things such as Syria. We've been looking at Ukraine. We're now working on the protection of children and young people as a new study. And so I just, when he goes back to talk about recommendation 2F, once again, to ensure that all reasonable OAS activities related to the promotion and protection of democratic governance and human rights are fully, consistently, and predictably funded. I know that, one of the things that we looked at was making sure that those core responsibilities or those core competencies that we see the OAS being good at, if they could focus on those, that would make it a lot easier, and that would also make sure that they are able to focus on the things that they do well, and quite frankly, that they have the most impact in. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.